Hey everyone, tonight I am working on a HackerRank challenge. This one is called Sherlock and Array. And in this challenge it says Watson gives Sherlock an array of integers. His challenge is to find an element of the array such that the sum of all elements to the left is equal to the sum of all elements to the right. So the first example that they give right here, if this is the array, four numbers 5, 6, 8, and 11, the number 8 is the number that would meet the condition that's outlined above here, because all the numbers to the left, 5 and 6, added up, their sum is 11, and all the numbers to the right, the only number is 11. So the left side and the right side are equal, all the numbers on either side of this number 8 right here. In doing this challenge, what we need to return is simply a string which either says yes or no if you find a number that, that meets that condition. So coming down here to look at a few more sample inputs, the number 2 tells us that this is 2 test cases down here. In the first test case, it's an input of length 3, and this array, it contains the numbers 1, 2, 3. None of those numbers satisfy the condition, so for this test case you would return no. For the bottom one down here, we have an input array of length 4, 1, 2, 3, and 3. And in this case, this would return yes, because if we look at this number 3 right here, the two numbers to the left sum up to 3, and the one number to the right is equal to 3. So the left and the right side on either side of this number is in fact equal. So getting into the code, I'm going to try to explain this step by step, one line at a time. So what I'll do is I'll set up some comments here to keep track of things as I work through the problem. So I'll use this array right here as the example I will follow along with as I explain this. So this array is 1, 2, 3, 3. And then what we're going to need are going to be two variables, a left variable and a right variable. And what I want to do as I code this out is start with the left variable as being equal to 0, and I'm actually going to start with the right variable as being the sum of the entire array, and I'll explain why we start with that in just a second. But if we add these numbers up, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3, that gives us 9. So that's the sum of all the numbers in the array. So let me put that in here into the code. So let left equals 0, and let right, to get the sum of the entire array, we want to do array.reduce. We pass in an accumulator and a current value, accumulator plus current value, and we have that start at an initial value of 0. Now, what I want to do is iterate through the array, and I'm going to do this as a for of loop because I think it looks a little bit cleaner. Let num of array, and I'll open this up. Now, the first time this loop runs, it's going to start right here looking at this number. The left variable is already correct because there are no numbers to the left, so this left sum is equal to 0. This right sum is not totally correct just yet because it's the sum of all of these numbers. So what I need to do to get the sum of the numbers that are only to the right of this number that we are looking at is to simply subtract this number from this right sum variable that we have set up here. So inside the for loop, I'm going to do right minus equals num. So at that line of code, in this example, right will become equal to 8 because we subtract 9 minus 1. Now, this is the point where we want to do the check to see if the left sum and the right sum are equal. So if left is equal to right, then we would want to return yes. Of course, at this point in the example that I'm walking through, these are not equal, so this would evaluate to false and it would move on to the next line of code. So what we want to do next, if this evaluates to be false and we're moving on, now we want to start incrementing or summing up the left sum variable over here. So I'm going to be doing that by essentially doing the reverse of what we did in this line. So down here, we'll do left plus equals the num. So the current num that we're looking at is this 1 right here. So we add that to our left variable, and left becomes 1. So now just to explain what's happening, I'll kind of keep following this along. So we run the second iteration of the for loop right here. We are now looking at this number, so num becomes 2. So the first line of the for loop runs right minus equals num. So right becomes 6. Then we do the comparison. If left is equal to right, 1 does not equal 6, so we continue. Then we do left plus equals the num. Remember that we're currently looking at number 2. So the left variable becomes 3. Now we move on to our third iteration of the for loop. So the num is now 3. We're looking right here. We run this first line of code, right minus equals num. So right becomes 3. And now left and right are equal, so this line would evaluate to true, and we would return yes, and that should get the correct output for what is expected for this input array right here. Now for another input array, if this were not true, the entire for loop would run. This would never evaluate to true, so you would not return yes, and once we exit out of that for loop, we could simply return no, because we would have checked every number in the input array and none of them would have met the condition. So this should correctly solve the problem as long as I've typed everything correctly here. I'm going to go ahead and submit the code. It always takes just a minute or so to run here. So we'll give it a second to run and see if that solves the problem. Looking good so far. Just waiting to make sure that everything is correct here. There we go. We get the congratulations banner. Tells me that everything is correct with how we coded this out. So hopefully this all makes sense. The process is pretty straightforward, starting with the left sum being 0, the right sum being the total sum of the entire array. Then as you iterate through the array, you decrement the right sum, check if left is equal to right. If it is not, then you continue and you increment the left sum by the value of the number. If you make it through the entire for loop, then you simply return no at the end. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you have any other questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below.